The battle was supposed to be over before it even began. The Coalition's fleet loomed large over the desolate planet of Erythor, their warships gleaming with deadly precision. Sleek, powerful, and bristling with weapons, they were the epitome of advanced alien engineering. They moved in perfect formation, their energy shields shimmering with an aura of invincibility. And then, there was the Resolve. It was an old human frigate, a relic from a war long forgotten. Rust clung to its hull, patches of mismatched metal held it together, and its engines sputtered like a dying beast gasping for air. The Coalition's fleet commander had laughed when they'd first detected it on their sensors. A lone, ancient ship standing between them and total victory? Ridiculous. Pathetic, sneered General Valor, his multiple eyes narrowing as he gazed at the holographic display. Humans always were delusional. Inside the Resolve, Captain Mara Elwood gripped the armrests of her command chair, feeling the familiar vibration of the aging engines through the metal. She could almost hear the ship's creaks and groans, like an old warrior rousing for one last battle. "Status report," she barked, her voice firm, masking any trace of fear. Lieutenant Harris looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "Shields at 20%. Weapons systems, operational but barely. The main cannon could fail if we push it too hard." "Figures," Mara muttered. The Resolve was never meant to face a fleet like this. It had been decommissioned, labeled as junk, and left to rot in the scrapyards. But when the Coalition had launched their surprise attack on Erythor, the human forces had scrambled for anything that could fly. Mara had volunteered, of course. She had history with this ship. It was her father's command before it was retired. A ship that once saved thousands of lives in a daring rescue. A ship that once mattered. She wasn't about to let it go down in disgrace. "They think we're useless," she said, her voice hardening. "Let's prove them wrong." The crew around her exchanged uneasy glances, doubt clouding their faces. There were only 40 of them aboard, barely enough to man the critical stations. Young recruits, veterans who'd been dragged out of retirement, and volunteers who'd never fired a weapon in their lives. But they were human, and that meant they were stubborn. "Patch me through to the fleet," Mara ordered. A flicker of static, and then the faces of the Coalition's commanders appeared on her screen, their alien features contorted with smug superiority. General Violor stood at the forefront, his 4 arms crossed, his scales reflecting a faint purple under the command center's lights. "Surrender, human," Violor drawled, his voice oily with confidence. "Your resistance is futile. This rust bucket is no match for my armada." Mara smiled, cold and unyielding. "You're right. This ship is old, weak. But do you know what humans do with broken things?" Valor's eyes narrowed. "They discard them, like we will discard you." "No," Mara said, her gaze burning with defiance. "We rebuild them. We make them stronger." She cut the transmission before he could respond. Her crew looked at her, determination starting to replace the fear in their eyes. "All right, people," Mara said, standing up and facing them. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and flying a ship they've already written off. But that's our advantage. They won't see us coming." Harris grinned, his fingers dancing over his console. "All systems ready, Captain." Mara's heart pounded. This was it. Do or die. Let's show them what this useless ship can do. The Resolve roared to life, its engines blazing a trail through the cold void of space. The Coalition's fleet moved to intercept, their formations precise and unbreakable. But Mara wasn't aiming for them. "Activate stealth protocols," she ordered. The old ship shuddered, flickering out of sight for just a moment, an experimental cloaking device humans never perfected. But Mara's father had. He'd hidden his family with it once, shielding them from a Coalition raid. Now it would shield his ship. They slipped through the gaps in the enemy lines, unseen and unnoticed. General Valor watched the screen, his smugness replaced with confusion. Where did they go? Mara smirked, her father's words echoing in her mind. Victory isn't about having the strongest ship. It's about using what you have better than anyone else. They were outmatched, yes. Outgunned, definitely. But they weren't outsmarted. Not yet. The Resolve charged forward, heading straight for the heart of the Coalition's command ship. The plan was suicidal, insane, and perfect. Mara's grip tightened on the controls, her voice steady as she gave the order. All power to the main cannon. Let's make history. The ship shuddered, energy crackling through its ancient circuits. The cannon glowed, brighter and brighter, until it was blinding. And then they fired. A beam of pure energy erupted from the Resolve's main cannon, slicing through the darkness of space like a spear of light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a burst of power that defied the age and condition of the ancient frigate. The Coalition's command ship barely had time to react. Its shields flared a dazzling blue as they absorbed the impact, straining against the unexpected onslaught. For a moment, it seemed they would hold. Then, with a crackle of overloaded circuits, they shattered like glass. The energy beam tore through the hull, carving a molten path from bow to stern. Explosions rippled along the ship's spine, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Fire and twisted metal danced in the void, and for the first time, the Coalition's perfect formation wavered. General Valor was thrown to the floor, his command center shaking violently. Alarms blared, and smoke filled the air. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with disbelief. How is that possible? On the bridge of the Resolve, cheers erupted. Lieutenant Harris let out a whoop of victory, slamming his fist on the console. Direct hit! Command ship is crippled! Mara allowed herself a brief smile. They'd done it. They'd struck at the heart of the enemy. But the battle was far from over. The Coalition's fleet moved to respond, adjusting their formation with ruthless efficiency. Dozens of warships turned, targeting the lone human frigate that had dared to wound them. Mara's smile vanished. Incoming fire! Shouted Ensign Liu, her voice tinged with panic. They're locking on! The void lit up with deadly brilliance. Plasma bolts, energy lances, and missiles streaked toward the Resolve, a barrage powerful enough to obliterate them 100 times over. Evasive maneuvers! Mara shouted, gripping the armrests as the ship lurched to the side. The Resolve moved with surprising agility for its age, twisting and weaving between the incoming fire. But it wasn't fast enough. Explosions rocked the hull as several shots found their mark. The lights flickered, and Mara felt the sickening jolt of the artificial gravity faltering. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the ship's frame groaned under the assault. Shields are gone, Harris shouted, his face pale. Hull integrity at 40%. Mara gritted her teeth. They couldn't take much more of this, but retreat wasn't an option. If they ran, the Coalition would regroup and crush the human resistance on Erythor. This was their only chance. Weapon status? She demanded. Secondary cannons operational, but the main cannons burned out, Harris replied. It'll take time to recharge. Time they didn't have. The Coalition fleet was closing in, surrounding them like wolves circling wounded prey. Mara's mind raced. They needed a new strategy, something unpredictable, something crazy. A memory surfaced, unbidden, her father's voice, calm and steady even in the worst battles. When you're out of options, make your own. She looked at the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. They were converging, tightening the noose. But in their overconfidence, they'd left one area lightly defended, the debris field created by their crippled command ship. An idea sparked. It was suicidal, reckless, but it might just work. Harris, "Plot a course through the wreckage of that command ship," she ordered. His eyes widened. "Captain, that area's unstable. Debris is everywhere, and the radiation—" "That's exactly why they won't expect us to go through it," Mara interrupted. "It's our only shot. If we can get behind them, we might be able to hit their carriers before they know what's happening." He hesitated, then nodded. "Plotting course. But it's going to be tight." Mara turned to Ensign Liu. "I need you on navigation. Keep us steady, no matter what." Liu's hands shook, but she set her jaw with determination. "Aye, Captain." The Resolve banked hard, its thrusters flaring as it dove toward the debris field. Fragments of the Coalition's shattered flagship floated through space, twisted metal and shattered hull plates spinning dangerously. Radiation from the ship's ruptured reactor created a shimmering, deadly haze. Mara's heart pounded as they entered the field, the proximity alarms blaring as debris scraped along the hull. "Stay focused, everyone. We get through this, and we win." Behind them, the Coalition fleet hesitated. Their sensors were struggling to penetrate the radiation, and they were wary of the unstable wreckage. Mara allowed herself a grim smile. They were buying time. But time was running out. The ship shuddered as a massive piece of wreckage loomed in front of them. Liu pulled hard on the controls, narrowly avoiding a collision. Smaller fragments bounced off the hull, each impact making the metal groan. "Engine temperature rising," Harris warned. "Cooling systems are failing." "Just a little longer," Mara urged, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. They were almost through. Just a few more seconds. The Resolve burst free from the debris field, emerging behind the Coalition's main formation. The enemy's rear was exposed, their carriers vulnerable. Mara's hands flew over the controls. "Target those carriers! Fire everything we've got!" The Resolve's cannons roared to life, blazing with fury. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, slamming into the unprotected carriers. Explosions blossomed across their hulls, ripping them apart. The Coalition fleet was thrown into chaos, their communications jammed by the radiation field. They scrambled to reorganize, their tight formations fracturing. Mara's crew cheered, but she kept her focus. This wasn't over yet. They'd landed a powerful blow, but they were still outnumbered. If the enemy regrouped, they'd be overwhelmed. "Prepare for another attack run," she ordered, her voice unwavering. "We're not done until they're running scared." The Resolve turned sharply, its engines straining, its hull battered but unbroken. They were outgunned, outmatched, but they weren't out of the fight. Not yet. Mara's eyes blazed with fierce determination. This useless ship was far from finished, and neither was she. The Coalition fleet reeled from the surprise attack, their carriers burning, their formations shattered. Panic rippled through their ranks as they struggled to comprehend how a single, ancient human frigate had torn through their lines. General Valor's face contorted with fury as he watched his forces flounder. His command ship was crippled, communications were in disarray, and the humans were exploiting every weakness. It was unthinkable, humiliating. "How is this possible?" he roared, slamming his fist against the console. "That ship should be scrap metal." His lieutenant hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "Their tactics, they're unpredictable. It's like they know exactly where to hit us." Valor's jaw tightened. Of course, humans were infuriatingly resourceful, reckless, but he wasn't about to let his legacy be destroyed by some obsolete piece of junk. "Order all remaining warships to converge on that frigate," he commanded, his voice cold with rage. "Overwhelm them. No mercy." The Coalition ships responded with brutal efficiency, regrouping and charging toward the Resolve like a tidal wave of firepower. Mara watched the sensors as dozens of hostile signatures lit up the screen, closing in fast. "They're coming at us from all sides," Harris reported, his voice tense. "We're completely surrounded." Mara felt the weight of it, the hopelessness of their situation pressing down on her. They'd done the impossible, broken the coalition's lines, but now they were trapped, outnumbered, outgunned, but not out of ideas. Not yet. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Keep them chasing us. If we stay unpredictable, they won't be able to pin us down." Lou's hands flew over the controls, and the Resolve twisted sharply, dodging a barrage of plasma bolts that tore through the space they'd occupied a heartbeat before. The coalition ships struggled to keep up, their rigid formations faltering as they tried to track the nimble frigate. Mara's eyes flicked to the tactical display, studying the enemy's movements. They were closing in fast, forming a tightening circle around the Resolve. If they were caught, it was over. But if they could break through... An idea sparked. It was risky. Reckless, but it was all they had. "Harris, what's the status on the main cannon?" He grimaced. "Still recharging. It's at 50%, but if we fire now, we'll blow out half the systems." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't need full power. Just enough to punch a hole." Realization dawned in his eyes. "You're going to use it to break the encirclement." "Exactly. They're overconfident, tightening their formation to trap us. If we hit them hard enough in one spot, we can force our way out before they can regroup." He hesitated, then nodded. "Diverting all power to the main cannon. It'll be ready in 30 seconds. "Good. Liu, get us into position. We only get one shot at this." The Resolve dove through the enemy lines, narrowly avoiding another wave of incoming fire. The coalition ships tightened the noose, closing in from all directions. They believed they had their prey cornered. Mara's heart raced as she watched the tactical display, the tension coiling in her chest like a spring ready to snap. "Steady. Steady. Wait for my mark." The coalition warships closed in, their weapons charging for a final devastating barrage. The trap was nearly sprung. "Cannon at 70%, Harris shouted, his hands trembling over the controls. "It's now or never." Mara's eyes blazed. "Fire!" The Resolve's main cannon roared to life once more, blasting a beam of energy that tore through the void, aimed at the coalition's weakest point. The enemy ships were too close, too committed to their trap to evade. The beam slammed into the lead warship, shattering its shields and ripping through its hull. The explosion cascaded outward, debris and shockwaves ripping into the vessels behind it. The encirclement shattered, leaving a gap just wide enough for an escape. "Full speed ahead!" Mara shouted. "Punch through before they close the gap!" Liu pushed the engines to their limits, the old frigate groaning as it surged forward. The Resolve shot through the opening, dodging the debris from the destroyed ships. Coalition vessels scrambled to pursue, but they were too slow, too disorganized. "They're falling behind!" Harris yelled, exhilaration in his voice. "We did it!" Mara didn't dare celebrate yet. They'd broken the encirclement, but they were still deep in enemy territory. "Don't let up. We've got to keep moving. Head for that asteroid field. We can lose them there." The Resolve hurtled toward the dense asteroid field on the edge of the battlefield, navigating through the tumbling rocks with breathtaking speed. Coalition warships pursued, but their larger, bulkier frames struggled to maneuver through the chaos. Explosions echoed through the field as enemy vessels collided with asteroids, their shields failing under the constant impacts. The Resolve danced through the danger, nimble and swift, barely squeezing through gaps that the coalition ships couldn't follow. General Valor watched, his fury turning to cold dread. He saw his forces falling apart, his formations crumbling and his enemies escaping. He slammed his fist against the console, his claws scratching deep grooves into the metal. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "I will not be humiliated by human scum." But even as he swore vengeance, the Resolve slipped further away, vanishing into the asteroid field's depths. Inside the ship, Mara finally allowed herself to breathe. They'd done the impossible once again. They'd broken free from certain death. But she knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The coalition was wounded, humiliated, but not defeated. And they'd come back with a vengeance. Mara looked at her exhausted crew, at the battered, scarred ship that had defied the odds. They'd made it this far, but the hardest battle was yet to come. She tightened her grip on the command chair, her resolve hardening. We're not done until the war is over, until they know what humans are capable of. The crew looked at her, hope and determination blazing in their eyes. They were ready. They were fighters. And they were far from finished. Mara turned her gaze to the stars, her heart burning with fierce defiance. This useless ship was going to win the war. One way or another. The resolve weaved through the asteroid field with a grace that defied its age, its thrusters flaring as it danced between tumbling rocks and deadly debris. Mara kept her eyes fixed on the tactical display, watching as the coalition ships struggled to follow. Their larger frames scraped against asteroids, shields flickering under the constant impacts. "They're losing us," Harris reported, his voice tinged with exhilaration. "They can't navigate this field like we can." Mara allowed herself a thin smile. That was the advantage of an older ship. No advanced autopilot to get confused by the unpredictable movements of the asteroid field. They were flying manually, on instinct and reflex, and humans were damn good at that. "Keep us close to the larger asteroids," she ordered. "We can use them as cover if they get a lock on us." Liu's fingers danced over the controls, guiding the resolve through the maze of drifting rocks. Every turn was precise, every movement calculated. Mara felt the familiar pull of inertia as they banked hard, narrowly avoiding a jagged fragment of metal from a destroyed coalition vessel. "They're still tracking us," Liu warned, glancing at her sensors. "They've sent in scouts, smaller ships designed for maneuverability." Mara's jaw tightened. Of course they wouldn't give up that easily. General Valor wasn't the type to admit defeat, not without exhausting every option. And if those scouts marked their position, the rest of the fleet would close in. She needed a plan. Something bold. Something that would turn the coalition's persistence into their downfall. "All right," she said, her mind racing. "We're going to use this field to our advantage. Harris, can we still control the main cannon's energy output?" He looked up, confusion flickering across his face. "Yeah, but it's unstable. Why?" Mara's eyes gleamed with determination. "We're going to detonate the asteroids." Silence fell over the bridge. Harris's mouth dropped open. "You're going to use the field as a minefield?" "Exactly," she confirmed. "We target the most unstable asteroids, the ones ready to break apart. If we hit them with a low-energy pulse, it'll trigger a chain reaction. The debris and shockwaves will take out their scouts and block their sensors." Liu's eyes widened. That's crazy." Mara grinned. "Crazy is the only thing that's kept us alive this long. Let's make it work." Harris nodded, his fingers flying over the weapons console. "Targeting the most unstable asteroids now. Pulse is ready on your command." Mara took a deep breath, her heart pounding. If this went wrong, they'd be caught in the blast. But if it worked, they'd disappear, and the coalition would be left chasing ghosts. "Fire!" The Resolve's main cannon hummed with energy, firing low-energy pulses at the targeted asteroids. The beams struck with pinpoint accuracy, causing the rocks to tremble, cracks spiderwebbing across their surfaces. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the asteroids exploded. Shockwaves ripped through the field, sending fragments of rock and metal spiraling outward at devastating speeds. The smaller coalition scouts were caught in the blast, their shields shattering as debris tore through them. One by one they were obliterated, reduced to burning wreckage. The larger coalition ships pulled back, their sensors overwhelmed by the chaos. Asteroids collided, triggering more explosions, creating a barrier of destruction that no ship could penetrate. Harris let out a whoop of victory. "We did it! Their scouts are gone, and they've lost our trail!" Mara exhaled, relief flooding through her. "Good, but we're not safe yet. We need to regroup and assess our situation." The Resolve drifted deeper into the asteroid field, moving slowly to avoid detection. The bridge fell quiet, the adrenaline of battle giving way to exhaustion. Mara felt the fatigue pressing down on her, but she couldn't rest yet. "Hull integrity?" she asked. Harris's expression darkened. "Not good. We're down to 20%. Another hit like the last one, and we'll be space dust." "Engines are overheating too," Liu added. "We've pushed them to the limit. They need time to cool down or we'll lose propulsion." Mara nodded, processing the grim reality. They were alive, but just barely. The Resolve was holding together, but only just. If they were going to finish this fight, they needed to be smart and fast. "We need to make repairs," she said, "but we can't go back to base. The Coalition will be watching every known outpost." Harris looked at her, a question in his eyes. "Then where do we go?" Mara's gaze drifted to the tactical display, to a small, isolated moon on the edge of the system. A forgotten place, long abandoned after the last war. She made her decision. "We go to Outpost Delta. It's hidden, and it's got the supplies we need to patch up this ship. If we're lucky, the Coalition won't even know it exists." Liu hesitated. "That place is ancient. Are you sure it's still operational?" Mara's eyes hardened. "It's our only option. Set course, and keep us under the radar. I don't want any more surprises." The Resolve turned slowly, its engines sputtering as it limped away from the battlefield. They'd survived another day, but the war was far from over. The Coalition would regroup, and they'd come back stronger, angrier. Mara tightened her grip on the command chair, her resolve unshaken. They'd beaten the odds before, and they'd do it again. This ship had been called useless, a relic of a forgotten era, but it was proving them all wrong, and she was going to make sure it kept proving them wrong, until the war was won. Outpost Delta loomed ahead, a ghostly silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. It was a relic from the First Galactic War, long abandoned and forgotten. Its massive docking arms hung limp, coated in centuries of dust and ice, its communication arrays shattered and useless. But to Mara, it was a beacon of hope. The Resolve drifted toward the outpost, its engines barely maintaining thrust. Sparks flickered from ruptured cables, and the hull groaned with the strain of battle damage. The ship was holding together by sheer willpower and duct tape, it seemed. Harris scanned the station, his fingers flying over the console. "No signs of life. Power levels are minimal, but there's enough for basic systems. We can dock manually." Mara nodded. "Good. Take us in slow. We can't afford any more damage." Liu guided the frigate toward the docking bay, navigating the narrow entrance with painstaking precision. The metal creaked as the magnetic clamps engaged, locking the Resolve in place. For a moment, everything was still. Quiet. They were safe. For now. Mara stood, her body aching from hours of tension. "All right, team. We need to move fast. We don't know how long we've got before the Coalition figures out where we went." She looked at her crew, exhausted, battered, but unbroken. "Harris, get the repair teams out there. Prioritize the engines and hull integrity. Liu, see if you can get the station systems online. We need power, comms, and anything that can help us get this ship running again." They moved quickly, determination driving them despite their fatigue. Mara watched them go, pride swelling in her chest. This crew wasn't just surviving. They were fighting back. proving that humanity wasn't finished. She made her way to the docking bay, the air cold and stale. The outpost had been abandoned for decades, its corridors echoing with the distant hum of dying machinery. As she stepped onto the metal floor, her boots clanged loudly, the sound echoing through the empty halls. It felt haunted, like walking through a graveyard of the past. Mara shook off the chill that crept up her spine. She didn't have time for ghosts. She found Harris outside the ship, directing the repair teams. Sparks flew as they welded new plates over damaged sections of the hull, sealing breaches and reinforcing weakened structures. Cables were strung along the exterior, rerouting power to bypass damaged circuits. "How's it looking?" she asked, crossing her arms to ward off the cold. Harris wiped sweat from his brow, his face grim. "We're patching it up as best we can, but this is temporary at best. The engines are fried. We can get them running again, but they won't hold up under combat conditions." Mara's jaw tightened. "We don't need them to. Just enough to get us back in the fight. What about weapons?" "Secondary cannons are operational, but the main cannon is shot. The energy coils are burned out. We'd need a complete replacement, and this outpost doesn't have that kind of tech." Mara cursed under her breath. The main cannon was their strongest weapon, the only reason they'd made it this far. Without it, they were at a severe disadvantage. "There's got to be something," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "This place was a military outpost. They must have kept some kind of armament." Harris shrugged. "If they did, it's well hidden. We've checked the obvious places. You'd need high-level clearance to access the more secure areas." Mara's eyes narrowed. Her father had once been stationed here, long before he'd taken command of the Resolve. He'd spoken of hidden storage rooms, armories concealed behind false walls, emergency supplies meant to outlast any siege. She just needed to find them. "I'll look into it. Keep working on the engines. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice." She turned and headed deeper into the outpost, her footsteps echoing through the silent corridors. Memories flooded back of her father's stories about this place, about the hidden passageways and secret vaults. If anyone knew where they were, it was him. His old office was exactly where she remembered, the door sealed tight with a biometric lock. She placed her hand on the scanner, half expecting it to deny her access. But the screen flickered, scanned her hand, and then the door hissed open. Mara's heart skipped a beat. Her father's authorization codes were still active. Inside, the office was covered in dust, the furniture untouched since the day he'd left. Maps of the galaxy lined the walls, marked with faded ink showing supply routes and strategic points. A desk sat against the far wall, a terminal dark and lifeless on its surface. Mara approached, her fingers trembling as she powered it up. The screen flickered, ancient hardware struggling to wake from decades of disuse. Finally, it sprang to life, and her father's old files appeared. She scrolled through the directories, searching for anything that could help. Tactical plans, supply manifests, personnel reports. And then she found it. A file marked Contingency Protocols. Her pulse quickened as she opened it, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Always have a backup plan, Mara, even when they say there isn't one." The file contained schematics for a hidden armory, concealed beneath the docking bay. A vault sealed with military-grade security, stocked with experimental weapons and supplies meant to turn the tide of any battle. Hope surged through her. This was it. This was their chance. She downloaded the schematics onto her datapad and rushed back to the docking bay, her mind racing with possibilities. If they could access that armory, they could refit the Resolve, repair the main cannon, and maybe even gain new weapons powerful enough to change the course of the war. Mara's heart pounded as she reached the bay, shouting for Harris and Lou. "I found it! I found the armory!" Their eyes widened as she showed them the schematics, their faces lighting up with hope. "Get the teams together," Mara ordered, her voice steady and firm. "We're going in, and we're coming out ready to win this war." The crew moved with renewed energy, the fatigue replaced by determination. They'd been beaten, battered, and hunted. But now they had a fighting chance. Mara looked back at the Resolve, its hull scarred but unbroken. They'd called this ship useless. A relic. But it was about to become the Coalition's worst nightmare, because they weren't just repairing a ship, they were rebuilding hope. The entrance to the hidden armory was exactly where the schematic said it would be, beneath the docking bay, concealed behind a wall of reinforced metal. It was cleverly designed, blending seamlessly with the surrounding structure, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. Mara stood before the wall, her heart racing. This was her father's legacy, a secret he'd taken to his grave. She placed her hand on the access panel, the biometric scanner humming to life. For a moment she feared it wouldn't work, that too much time had passed, or that the system would reject her. But the screen flickered, scanned her hand, and the wall shuddered, gears grinding as it slid aside to reveal a narrow passage. A cold gust of air escaped from the darkness beyond, stale and untouched for decades. Harris's eyes widened, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I'll be damned. It was here all along." Mara's jaw tightened. "My father never did anything halfway. If he wanted a hidden armory, he made sure it stayed hidden." Liu shivered, glancing into the darkness. "What's down there?" "Only one way to find out," Mara replied, steeling herself. She switched on her flashlight and stepped into the passage, her crew close behind. The corridor was narrow and cold, the walls lined with ancient metal panels that groaned under the weight of time. Dust hung heavy in the air, undisturbed by any living thing. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps, amplified by the enclosed space. After several minutes, they reached a heavy blast door, its surface scarred and worn. An access panel flickered with faint light, the symbols glowing dimly. It was another biometric scanner, older but still functional. Mara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the panel. This was the moment of truth. If her father's codes didn't work here, they'd be trapped outside, helpless. She took a deep breath and pressed her hand to the scanner. The screen scanned her palm, the ancient system grinding as it processed the input. The seconds stretched on, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. Then, with a loud hiss, the door unlocked, gears turning as it slowly opened. A blast of cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Lights flickered on, illuminating a massive chamber filled with rows of weapon crates, racks of armor, and consoles covered in dust. Experimental energy cannons lined the walls, their sleek barrels gleaming even after decades of neglect. Harris let out a low whistle. "We hit the jackpot." Mara's eyes roamed over the stockpile, her heart pounding. This was more than an armory. It was a treasure trove of advanced technology, weapons designed to change the course of a war. "We can refit the Resolve with this," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "New weapons, upgraded shields, maybe even a power core strong enough to boost the main cannon." Liu grinned, excitement lighting up her face. "With this firepower, we can punch through the Coalition's fleet." Mara felt a surge of hope. This was exactly what they needed. A chance to strike back, to show the Coalition that humanity wasn't defeated yet. She turned to her crew, her voice steady and commanding. "All right, listen up. We've got work to do. Harris, start cataloging the weapons. Liu, see if you can access the consoles and get the schematics for installation. We're going to retrofit the Resolve and turn this rust bucket into a war machine." They moved quickly, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of newfound hope. Crates were opened, revealing energy rifles, plasma grenades, and advanced targeting systems. Armor plating was stacked, ready to reinforce the ship's weakened hull. Mara ran her hands over one of the energy cannons, feeling the cold metal under her fingertips. It was powerful, sleek, designed to punch through the toughest shields. If they could get this installed on the Resolve, they'd have a fighting chance. But as she turned to help with the retrofitting, Liu's voice cut through the air, urgent and fearful. "Captain, we've got a problem." Mara rushed over to the console, her stomach twisting as she saw the screen. It was displaying a warning message, red symbols flashing ominously. "It's a security system," Liu explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "When we opened the armory, it sent out a distress signal. It's broadcasting our location." Mara's blood ran cold. "To who?" Liu's face paled. "To the Coalition. They know we're here?" Harris's expression turned grim. "They'll be on us in minutes. We need to move." Mara's mind raced. The Coalition wasn't just coming to destroy them. They were coming to reclaim the armory, to seize the weapons that could change the war. She couldn't let that happen. "All right, change of plans," she barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "We take what we can carry and rig the rest to blow. We can't let these weapons fall into enemy hands." Harris and Liu moved swiftly, gathering power cores, energy cells, and targeting systems. Mara helped them load the equipment onto anti-grav carts, pushing them back toward the docking bay. She stayed behind just long enough to set the explosives, wiring them to the armory's power core. The blast would be massive, enough to turn the entire outpost into a smoking crater. They rushed back to the Resolve, alarms blaring as the docking clamps released. The ship's engines roared to life, straining as they lifted off. "Captain, Coalition warships incoming," Liu shouted, her hands dancing over the navigation console. "They'll be on top of us in 30 seconds. Mara gritted her teeth. "Punch it. Get us out of here now." The Resolve surged forward, its newly upgraded thrusters flaring with power. They shot out of the docking bay, leaving the outpost behind. On the display, Mara watched as the Coalition warships closed in, their sleek frames bristling with weapons. But before they could fire, the outpost exploded, a massive fireball engulfing the entire structure. The shockwave ripped through the Coalition fleet, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Mara's heart pounded as she saw several ships spiral out of control, caught in the blast. Harris let out a whoop of victory. "We did it! The armory's gone. They get nothing." Mara exhaled, her shoulders sagging with relief. They'd escaped. Barely. But they weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. And they were ready. She looked at the tactical display, at the Coalition warships reforming their ranks. "Set a course for the front lines. It's time we showed them what this useless ship can do." The Resolve roared forward, its new weapons gleaming, its engines blazing with renewed power. The Coalition thought they were broken, beaten, defeated. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The Resolve tore through space, its newly upgraded engines blazing with power. The retrofits had worked better than Mara could have hoped. The ancient frigate felt alive, reborn with the advanced technology they'd scavenged from the armory. Energy surged through the ship's circuits, weapon systems humming with newfound potency. The crew worked feverishly at their stations, exhilaration coursing through them. They'd escaped certain death, defied the Coalition's pursuit, and armed themselves with the most powerful weapons humanity had ever wielded. But they weren't safe yet. Liu's voice cut through the bridge, sharp and urgent. "Multiple Coalition warships on intercept course. They're regrouping fast. They must be furious about the armory." Mara's lips curled into a grim smile. "Let them be angry. It'll make them reckless." She straightened, her voice commanding. Harris, weapons status? All systems green, Harris replied, his eyes gleaming. The new cannons are online, and we've boosted the shields with the power cores we took. We're packing enough firepower to give them hell. Good, Mara said, her jaw tightening. They think they've got us cornered. Let's show them what this ship can do. The Coalition fleet came into view, a wall of sleek warships blocking their escape. Mara's tactical display lit up with hostile signatures, their weapons charging. At the forefront was General Valor's flagship, its menacing silhouette gleaming under the starlight. His voice crackled over the comms, dripping with fury. You're persistent, human, but this ends now. You cannot win. Mara's eyes burned with defiance. You said this ship was useless, a relic. And yet, here we are, still fighting, still standing. Let's see if your fleet can say the same. Valor's eyes narrowed. I'll enjoy watching your ship burn. The transmission cut off, and the enemy warships opened fire. Plasma bolts and energy lances streaked across the void, a deadly barrage aimed straight at the Resolve. But this time, they were ready. Activate new shields, Mara ordered. A shimmering blue field enveloped the Resolve, absorbing the incoming fire. The advanced shielding systems held firm, dissipating the energy in crackling arcs of electricity. The ship shook, but it stayed intact. Harris whooped. Shields holding! These upgrades are incredible! Mara grinned, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Then let's put them to good use. Return fire, target their flanks. The Resolve's new energy cannons roared to life, blazing with vibrant blue light. Beams of pure energy tore through space, slamming into the Coalition's forward warships. Their shields shattered under the onslaught, hulls rupturing as explosions rippled through their frames. The enemy fleet faltered, their perfect formation breaking apart. Mara seized the opportunity. Full attack! Press the advantage! They surged forward, weaving through the disorganized Coalition ranks. The Resolve danced between enemy ships, firing relentlessly. Plasma bolts and torpedoes shot out in rapid succession, striking at weak points, detonating engines and weapons arrays. Coalition warships exploded in fiery blooms, their debris scattering through space. Panic spread through their ranks, confusion rippling as they tried to regroup. But Mara didn't give them a chance. She pressed harder, exploiting every gap, every hesitation. They'd underestimated this ship. They'd underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price. Inside his flagship, General Valor's face contorted with rage. He watched his warships fall, one after another, to a single human frigate. It was impossible, unthinkable, yet it was happening before his eyes. They're breaking through our lines, his lieutenant shouted, panic in his voice. They're too fast, we can't get a lock on them. Valor slammed his fist against his console, his scales shimmering with fury. Unacceptable. Concentrate all fire on that ship. Overwhelm them. His fleet moved to obey, turning all their weapons on the Resolve. Plasma bolts, missiles, and energy lances flooded the void, a relentless storm of destruction. The Resolve shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering. Alarms blared, and Mara gripped her chair, her voice firm. Hold steady. Divert power to forward shields. We're punching through. Liu's hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship through the deadly barrage. The new thrusters burned with power, propelling them forward at breakneck speed. Mara's eyes locked on the tactical display. There, an opening. The Coalition's flagship was exposed, its flanks vulnerable. If they could hit it hard enough, they could break the entire fleet's coordination. Harris, prepare the main cannon, Mara commanded. Target the flagship's engines. He hesitated. The main cannon's still unstable. If we fire now, we could overload the system. Mara's gaze was steely. If we don't, we'll be overwhelmed. We're taking the shot. Ready the cannon. Harris nodded, his fingers dancing over the weapons console. The ship trembled as energy surged through its circuits, the main cannon charging with blinding light. General Vaylor's eyes widened as he saw the glow, realization dawning too late. "No, they wouldn't dare." Mara's voice was cold, unyielding. "Fire." The Resolve's main cannon roared, unleashing a beam of energy that tore through space, aimed straight at Vaylor's flagship. The beam slammed into the ship's engines, piercing its shields and ripping through its hull. Explosions cascaded through the flagship's frame, fire and debris venting into the void. The massive warship shuddered, its lights flickering, its engines failing. The Coalition fleet hesitated, their flagship crippled, their command structure shattered. Mara seized the moment. "All units, attack! Break their lines!" The Resolve charged forward, leading the assault. The Coalition warships faltered, their coordination crumbling without Vaylor's orders. One by one, they fell, explosions lighting up the void. General Vaylor's face twisted with rage and despair as his flagship burned around him. He watched in horror as the Resolve tore through his fleet, unstoppable, relentless. His voice shook with fury. This isn't over, human." Mara's eyes were cold, her voice unwavering. "Yes, it is. This ship was useless, remember? You were wrong." She cut the transmission, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The Coalition fleet was in full retreat, their warships fleeing in disarray. They'd done it. They'd broken the Coalition's lines, shattered their forces. The Resolve had won. Cheers erupted across the bridge, relief and victory washing over the crew. Harris laughed, his voice choked with emotion. "We did it. We actually did it." Mara allowed herself a small smile, her shoulders relaxing. They'd beaten the odds, defied expectations, and turned the tide of the war. This useless ship had proven them all wrong. And it wasn't done yet. Mara looked out at the stars, her eyes blazing with determination. The war wasn't over, but they'd shown the galaxy what humanity could do. They were far from finished. This was only the beginning.